Gloombeard roared in frustration, and his cry was so violent, so guttural, that it seemed to ripple across the very fabric of the sky. The sound was a living thing, booming like thunder through the wounded clouds, and even the lightning that had been flashing around the pirate fleet seemed to hesitate for a heartbeat, as though the storm itself were frightened of its master's fury. In his clenched fist, the captain still held the strange compass that had lured him on this endless pursuit of light. But now the device no longer glowed with its false promises. The dial spun wildly, as if mocking him, never settling on any true north. Gloombeard's teeth gnashed audibly, his lips curling back into a snarl. With a curse so foul that several of his crewmen flinched as though struck, he hurled the compass down onto the planks of his deck. The small, round object clattered once, twice, and then began to roll, its needle jerking spasmodically, as if the compass itself were desperate to crawl away from the wrath of the man who had carried it. For a brief moment, Gloombeard followed it with his eyes, his breath coming in hot, uneven bursts. He stomped toward it like a beast, closing in on prey. The crew fell silent, every man and woman watching, waiting to see what punishment the captain would inflict on the treacherous object. His massive boots struck the wood with a rhythm like war drums. Then, just as the compass tilted to a stop near the edge of the deck, he drew back his foot and kicked it with such savage force that the sound of the blow echoed across the air. The compass sailed into the void, spinning end over end, its weak gleam catching the last shreds of light from the glowing gates of the city. Milo, watching from his own ship only a short distance away, felt his stomach lurch as the thing that had guided him for so long vanished into the endless storm below. The moment stretched out in silence, and then the compass was gone, swallowed whole by the mist and shadow beneath. Its light winked out as quickly as a candle extinguished by a careless breath. Gloombeard leaned over the railing, his beard bristling with fury, and spat into the void. "Worthless! Cursed thing!" he bellowed. His voice cracked on the word "cursed," and Milo realized with a shiver that there was more than anger in the pirate's tone. There was fear, too. Fear that he had been deceived. Fear that everything he had fought for was meaningless. The pirates gathered around their captain, their expressions sour and uncertain. Some muttered curses of agreement, while others simply stared at the boy's ship and the shimmering gates beyond it, longing and regret flickering in their eyes. "Retreat!" Gloombeard roared suddenly, his decision cutting through the mutters like a blade. "We've been tricked. This light is not for the likes of us." He turned back to his men, his hands shaking slightly though he tried to hide it, and jabbed a finger toward the clouds. "Turn us about, all of you. Back into the storm. Back to the shadows where we belong." A chorus of groans and protests rippled through the deck. "Captain," one sailor began, but Gloombeard's glare silenced him at once. The pirates were hardened men, their skin weathered by salt and smoke, but none had the courage to openly defy their leader. With gritted teeth, they set about their work. Sails were unfurled, ropes pulled taut, and the groaning air balloons that kept their flying armada aloft strained as the fleet turned. The pirate ships began to wheel slowly away, their banners whipping violently in the dying storm. Even in retreat, they hurled words at Milo across the gap of sky, mocking laughter, bitter threats, promises of revenge. "Enjoy your shining city, boy," one voice called out. "But remember, no light lasts forever," another cried. "We'll be waiting when it fades." Their voices grew smaller and smaller as the armada melted into the distance. At last, the storm itself seemed to close around them, shrouding the fleet until nothing remained but silence. Milo remained at the wheel, trembling from head to toe, his knuckles pale from clutching the wood so tightly. The sudden quiet after the chaos was deafening. The storm clouds were still dark around him, but they seemed thinner now, like curtains parting to reveal a stage. He felt both relief and dread coursing through him at once. The compass, the faithful guide that had carried him across impossible skies, was gone forever. For a fleeting second, despair clawed at him. How would he know where to go now? How would he continue the journey without its steady light? But then, just as the pirate's final jeers faded, a strange calm rose up in him like a tide. He realized, with startling certainty, that he no longer needed the compass. The object had brought him this far, yes, but it had only ever been a tool. The real strength that had carried him through storms and dangers was not in the needle of a trinket, but in his own choices, his courage, and the beating of his heart. The thought filled him with a warmth so steady that for a moment Milo forgot the cold bite of the wind. He raised his eyes to the horizon, where the gates of the city of endless light shimmered with promise. The pirates were gone. The compass was gone. But he was still here, alive, steady, and unbroken. For the first time, Milo truly believed he belonged to the sky. Milo stood frozen at the wheel, the ghost of the compass's absence still tugging at his mind like a missing limb. For so long, that little object had been his tether, his guide, his certainty in a world where every cloud seemed to hide a threat. He could still picture it glowing faintly in his palm, whispering directions with its unerring needle. And now it was gone, hurled into the abyss with Gloombeard's fury, lost forever in the stormy void below. His first thought was panic. What will I do without it? His heart stuttered, and his eyes darted to the horizon as if searching for something, anything that could replace it. But in the same breath, a startling calm overtook him, so sudden that he gasped. His pulse slowed, his fingers relaxed on the wheel, and a quiet realization spread through him like warm sunlight after endless rain. He did not need the compass anymore. He never truly had. The truth unfolded inside him with simple, dazzling clarity. The compass had pointed, yes, but it had never chosen. It had not steered him through the raging storms, or faced down the laughter of cruel pirates, or braved nights when the sky was so black he thought he might dissolve into it. Those choices had been his. Each decision, small or great, had been made by his own courage, by the part of him that refused to give in even when he felt hopeless. The compass had been a spark, nothing more. The flame had always been inside him. And now, standing at the helm of his weary ship, he felt that flame flare brighter than ever before. Pika fluttered to his shoulder, the parrot's feathers ruffled from the storm, but his eyes sharp. "Well?" the bird squawked, tilting his head. "That's that, eh?" "No compass, no pirates, just us, kid." Milo smiled faintly, still dazed by the calm wrapping around him like a cloak. "Just us," he repeated, and the words felt truer than anything he had ever said. He turned his face toward the glowing gates in the distance. The light there pulsed with steady brilliance, not demanding, not commanding, but welcoming. It was as if the city itself had been waiting for him to let go of the crutch of the compass, to recognize that the journey had never been about following a needle, but about discovering his own direction. The boy's heart swelled with a strange mix of sorrow and relief. He thought of all the times he had clutched the compass in fear, praying it would not fail him. He thought of the countless moments when doubt had gnawed at him, when he believed he was too small, too ordinary to survive in a world filled with storms and shadows. And yet here he stood, having outlasted pirates, lightning, and despair. "I thought I needed it," Milo whispered almost to himself. "But I didn't." I just needed to believe. His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't mind. Tears stung his eyes, and he let them fall freely, carried away by the wind. As if in answer to his revelation, the storm itself seemed to yield. The clouds around the ship thinned, their edges glowing faintly in the golden light ahead. The winds, once wild and violent, softened into a steady current that cradled his vessel as though unseen hands were guiding it forward. Milo adjusted the wheel slightly, and the ship responded with ease, gliding smoothly through the air. For the first time, he did not feel as though he were wrestling the elements. Instead, he felt aligned with them, as though sky and ship and boy were moving together in harmony. The sensation filled him with awe, and his breath caught in his throat. He was not drifting helplessly. He was steering. He was the compass now. The thought settled in him like a vow. He remembered stories told by old sailors in smoky taverns of explorers who charted new worlds by instinct alone, who trusted their hearts more than their maps. He had always dismissed those tales as exaggerations, the bravado of men who wanted their names remembered. But now he understood. The compass was not a device. It was a truth within. A truth that pointed not to gold or treasure, but to the kind of person he wanted to be. And standing here, on the threshold of the city of endless light, Milo felt certain of what that person was becoming. Pika squawked again, softer this time. "You're quiet, kid." Thinking too much. Milo chuckled through his tears and reached up to stroke the bird's feathers. "No," he said with a small, steady smile. "I'm not thinking." I'm knowing his voice was steady, firm, alive with conviction. The boy who had once doubted every step now stood taller, his shoulders squared, his gaze unwavering. He did not need to ask where to go anymore. The answer was already clear, shining within him as brightly as the city's gates. And so Milo gripped the wheel not with desperation, but with confidence. The pirates had fled. The compass was gone. The path was his to choose, and for the first time he felt no fear at all. As if answering his newfound certainty, the colossal gates of the city began to stir. At first, Milo thought it was a trick of the light. The towering arches glimmered so brilliantly that their edges blurred, and he could hardly tell stone from flame, shape from radiance. But then the shimmering lines shifted, great slabs of gold and crystal groaning with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very air. The boy's mouth fell open. The gates were moving. Slowly, majestically, they parted, spilling an unearthly brilliance across the sky. The light was not harsh like the lightning he had braved, nor blinding like the flares of battle. It was gentle yet overwhelming, warm yet infinite. It poured into every shadow, chasing darkness from the clouds, stretching beams across the heavens as though dawn itself were being born anew. Milo raised a hand to shield his eyes, but even through his fingers the radiance bathed him, seeping into his skin, into his very bones. He felt as though the light was not merely around him, but inside him, filling the cracks left by fear and loneliness with something unshakable. Pika screeched in surprise, flapping his wings wildly as the brilliance enveloped the ship. "Bright!" "Too bright," the parrot squawked, though his voice was half awe, half complaint. Milo laughed softly, the sound trembling but real. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his words stolen instantly by the glow. The gates swung wider still, and the air around them thrummed like the strings of a giant harp. The vibrations set the sails of Milo's ship fluttering gently, not with the violence of storm winds, but with a steady rhythm, as if the vessel had fallen into step with some vast celestial heartbeat. Then, without Milo's command, the ship began to move forward. At first he thought the winds had shifted again, but no. There was no pull, no push. It was as though unseen hands, soft yet certain, were guiding the vessel toward the open gates. He tightened his grip on the wheel, instinct telling him to steer, to resist. But then he paused. There was no need. The ship was gliding smoothly, faithfully, carried not by chance but by welcome. He let his hands relax, and for a daring moment he lifted them entirely, watching as the vessel sailed on its own, cradled in the golden tide. His chest tightened, not with fear, but with awe. He was being carried into something vast, something beyond even the wildest dreams he had clung to when he first set sail. The clouds peeled back as the flood of light swept over them, revealing colors he had never seen before. Blues richer than sapphire, purples deep as twilight oceans, streaks of silver like living rivers across the sky. The air itself seemed alive, sparkling with motes that danced like fireflies. Milo could hear faint echoes rising in the brilliance, voices perhaps, though too distant and musical to be ordinary speech. He wondered if the city itself was singing, or if the voices were the dreams of all who had once longed for this place. Whatever it was, the sound filled him with a peace so deep that his knees buckled. He gripped the railing for support, laughing shakily through the tears that spilled down his cheeks. Pika landed on his shoulder again, unusually quiet. His head tilted as though even the sharp-tongued bird could not find words to match the sight before them. Together they watched as the gates finally reached their full span, open wide to reveal a passage bathed in radiance so total it felt like stepping into the heart of the sun. Yet there was no burning, no searing. The light was alive, gentle, wrapping them in a promise. You are welcome here. You have made it home. Milo thought of every trial that had brought him to this threshold, the storms that battered him, the pirates who hunted him, the endless nights when he clutched the compass in desperation. He thought of his younger self, the boy who had set out trembling but determined, chasing a dream he barely understood. That boy would never have believed this moment possible, and yet, here he was, standing at the gates of a city sung of in whispers and myths, with nothing but his own courage to carry him. His throat tightened, and he bowed his head in silent gratitude. Not to the compass, not to luck, not even to fate, but to the strength he had finally recognized within himself. The ship drifted forward still, slow and steady, as though savoring the moment. The golden light wrapped around its timbers, making the battered vessel glow like it had been reforged. Every scar on the wood, every patch on the sails shone proudly, not as flaws, but as proof of survival. Milo reached out, letting his fingers trail across the railing, and for the first time, he did not see a boy's fragile craft. He saw a true explorer's ship, carrying him faithfully to the destiny he had chosen. And as the bow of the vessel crossed into the brilliance, Milo's heart surged with certainty. He was ready. Inside the gates, the world unfolded in a spectacle so wondrous that Milo nearly forgot to breathe. The city of endless light was alive, truly alive. Not in the way that a bustling port town bustled with noise and motion, but in a deeper, almost cosmic sense. Every tower, every bridge, every street seemed to hum with a soft, golden pulse, as though the city itself were a great, benevolent heart, beating in rhythm with the universe. The skyline soared into the heavens, a crown of spires and domes that glittered like constellations made solid. Rainbow-arched bridges crisscrossed between them, their surfaces translucent and shimmering as if spun from light itself. Milo's eyes darted everywhere, wide as saucers, trying desperately to take it all in at once. The flowing waterfalls that cascaded from towers yet never ran dry, the gardens of glowing flowers that swayed though no wind touched them, the crystalline rivers that wound their way between streets and harbors, reflecting the brilliance above until it seemed the entire city floated on stars. And there were people, so many people. Not the weary, snarling faces of pirates, nor the suspicious glares of storm-battered travelers, but a sea of radiant smiles. Men and women of all kinds walked the shining streets, their robes and garments woven from threads that caught the light and scattered it in hues too rich for mortal dyes. Children darted between them, their laughter rising like bells as they chased luminous birds with feathers like stained glass. Merchants called cheerfully from market stalls carved of glowing stone, where fruits sparkled like jewels and instruments shimmered with strings of silver. Musicians stood on balconies above, strumming harps whose notes rang out not just in sound but in color, shimmering streaks that painted the air itself. Milo's mouth fell open, and he gripped the railing of his ship tightly, afraid that if he blinked, the vision would vanish like a dream. As his vessel drifted deeper into the harbor, more details revealed themselves. Dock workers, their skin glowing faintly as though lit from within, moved gracefully along piers made of shining crystal. They guided ships not with ropes, but with gestures, as if the air itself obeyed their hands. And what ships they were! Some resembled Milo's, patched and weathered, the proud scars of long journeys marking their hulls. Others gleamed with alien shapes, sleek vessels of silver and glass, sails woven from gossamer that caught the light like butterfly wings. A few floated without sails at all, drifting serenely above the water as if buoyed by the very glow of the city. Yet every crew, no matter how strange their ship, stepped onto the docks with the same expression: awe, relief, joy. It was clear to Milo that he was not the first to arrive here, though the welcome awaiting him felt no less miraculous. The closer his ship drew to the dock, the larger the crowd became. Word of his arrival seemed to spread like fire through dry grass. People gathered along the quay, their voices rising in excitement, their hands raised not in defense but in greeting. Children pointed eagerly at him, and strangers cheered as though they had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. Milo felt his cheeks burn crimson. He glanced at Pika, who sat puffed up and preening on the mast, clearly reveling in the attention. "Looks like they rolled out the welcome carpet, kid," the parrot squawked with pride. Milo swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had imagined this moment countless times in his dreams, but never, not once, had he pictured it like this. He had thought he might creep into the city unnoticed, a small boy sneaking into greatness. Instead, the city itself seemed to recognize him, to embrace him. The harbor bells rang, not the clanging of iron, but a soft, resonant peal, as if each note carried a blessing. The sound trembled through Milo's bones, and he realized he was smiling even as tears blurred his vision. He guided the ship, though it seemed to need no guiding at all, toward the grandest pier where steps of glowing marble led up into the city proper. As the vessel bumped gently against the dock, unseen forces securing it with perfect precision, Milo's knees nearly gave way. The reality of it all pressed down on him at once. He was here. He had made it. The boy who had once stared at maps by candlelight, dreaming of more than the horizon he could see, was now standing at the gateway of a city sung of in legends. And as the gangplank lowered with a soft creak, Milo heard the crowd erupt in cheers so loud and joyful that he had to clutch the railing to steady himself. They were not cheering a stranger. They were cheering him. From within the crowd, a figure began to move forward, and the sea of faces parted with a reverence that made Milo's breath hitch. The figure was tall, their steps unhurried, each movement carrying the weight of ages, yet with a grace so fluid it seemed they might have been woven from the very light of the city. Robes flowed around them, long and trailing, glimmering like rivers of molten starlight that rippled with every step. Jewels, or perhaps stars themselves, were threaded into the fabric, scattering soft sparks across the ground as they walked. Their face was lined not with age in the mortal sense, but with depth, each crease a mark of wisdom earned through centuries of watching travelers arrive. The crowd bowed their heads as the elder passed, their voices falling into silence until only the soft hum of the city remained. Milo's heart pounded. This was no ordinary citizen, no sailor or dreamer like the rest. This was someone who embodied the spirit of the city itself. When the elder reached the dock where Milo's ship rested, they paused, lifting their gaze to meet his. The boy froze. His breath caught in his chest, for the elder's eyes seemed to hold entire skies within them. They shimmered with galaxies, with storms and stars, with nights and dawns. It was as if the elder saw not only Milo, but every moment of his journey, the times he had faltered, the choices he had made, the courage he had summoned when despair seemed certain. Milo trembled under that gaze, yet he did not feel judged. He felt seen, completely, wholly seen, in a way he never had been before. His hands clenched at his sides, unsure whether to salute, bow, or hide his face, but before he could decide, the elder spoke. "Welcome, Explorer Milo." The voice was deep yet soft, carrying with it the resonance of bells rung at dawn, the sigh of wind through high canyons, the warmth of fire crackling in the hearth. It was not a single voice, but many, layered and harmonious, as though the elder's words were being echoed by the city itself. The sound settled into Milo's bones, wrapping around him, leaving him trembling with awe. He lowered his gaze quickly, cheeks burning. "Explorer," the elder had called him. Not boy, not child, not stranger. Explorer. The elder inclined their head in a gesture of respect, robes swaying gently like currents of light. "You have passed the true tests," they continued, their words carrying across the dock so that all could hear. "Not of wealth, nor of strength, nor of conquest. Many have come seeking these gates, clutching treasures or weapons, believing force or cunning would grant them entry. Yet the city opens for none of those things. It opens only for the spirit that shines with honesty, kindness, and courage." Their eyes softened, and a faint smile tugged at their lips. "And you, Milo, carry those keys within you." The words struck Milo like a wave. All at once, memories surged through him, giving his last scrap of food to a fellow traveler he'd met on a drifting cloud isle, standing his ground against Gloombeard when fear begged him to run, whispering promises to himself in the darkest nights that he would not give up. He thought of all the times he had doubted, convinced he was too small, too foolish, too weak, and yet somehow he had kept moving forward. Those choices, those small acts of bravery and compassion, had been the true compass guiding him. Tears burned hot in his eyes, and he pressed a fist against his chest to steady the storm of emotion there. The elder raised their arms, and the crowd erupted in cheers once more. "Today, the city of endless light welcomes a new explorer into its heart," they proclaimed. Not because of the compass that once guided him, not because of battles won or dangers overcome, but because of the light he carried within all along. And so, let it be known, this child of the skies is one of us. The crowd surged forward, their joy a tangible force. Some clapped, others sang, and children threw handfuls of luminous petals into the air where they drifted slowly like glowing snow. Milo ducked his head, overwhelmed, his face burning as tears streaked down his cheeks. He felt Pika shift on his shoulder, puffing out his chest proudly as if basking in the recognition on Milo's behalf. The boy laughed through his sobs, unable to contain the wild, bubbling joy in his chest. He had not just stumbled into the city, he had earned it. In that moment, beneath the elders' gaze and the crowd's embrace, Milo knew the truth. He had not merely arrived at the city of endless light. He had become worthy of it. The celebration swelled around Milo like a tide of warmth, carrying him higher than he had ever dreamed. Music rang through the streets, sweet and jubilant, as instruments fashioned from crystal and light wove melodies that seemed to dance on the very air. People pressed close, their smiles radiant, their voices calling his name as though he had always been a part of their story. Children tugged eagerly at his hands, their laughter bubbling up like 1,000 silver bells, while elders placed glowing garlands around his shoulders, the petals shimmering with hues that shifted from gold to azure to violet, as if reflecting the colors of his spirit. Milo stood stunned, his cheeks wet with tears he no longer tried to hide, his chest aching from the joy threatening to burst within it. He had dreamed of the city of endless light since he first heard the legends whispered, but never had he imagined this. Never had he thought he would be embraced so completely, so unquestioningly, as though he truly belonged. Pika strutted along the railing of the ship, soaking in the attention as if the entire celebration had been thrown for him. "That's right," the parrot squawked proudly. "Milo and Pika, champions of the sky. Explorers extraordinaire." His wings flapped dramatically, scattering loose feathers that glowed faintly in the ambient light. Milo laughed, wiping at his damp face as he looked up at his companion. "I suppose you earned it too, didn't you?" he said, voice shaking with mirth and gratitude. Pika tilted his head haughtily, then leaned close to peck Milo affectionately on the ear. "Wouldn't have made it without me, kid," he croaked, though his voice softened at the edges. Milo grinned. "No, we wouldn't have." And he meant it. They had survived together, laughed together, cried together, and now they were being celebrated together. But amid the jubilation, a deeper awareness began to stir within Milo. He lifted his gaze to the luminous towers rising in the distance, their spires reaching beyond sight into skies still waiting to be explored. The streets stretched endlessly, vanishing into glowing horizons, each corner humming with secrets and adventures untold. He realized then that the city was not an ending at all. It was a beginning, a promise. The compass that had guided him to these gates had fulfilled its purpose, yes, but the compass of his own heart had only just begun to point toward greater wonders. The thought sent a shiver through him, not of fear, but of exhilaration. The elder's words echoed softly in his memory. The city opens only for the spirit that shines with honesty, kindness, and courage. Milo pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his palm. That light, that compass, was his to carry into every step that lay ahead. And for the first time he understood that this journey had never been about reaching a final destination. It had been about becoming the kind of person who could carry the light forward, wherever he went. He was no longer the boy trembling on the deck of a fragile ship, clutching at a compass in desperation. He was an explorer, ready to face whatever lay beyond the next horizon. Around him, the city glowed with endless possibilities. He could see paths winding upward into towers that glittered like constellations brought to earth, markets bustling with wares that shimmered faintly as if made from pieces of dreams, bridges stretching toward distant districts where new songs were already being sung. Each direction beckoned him with its own promise of wonder. And Milo, instead of being overwhelmed, felt a fierce eagerness rising within him. His story was not finished. It was only just beginning. Pika gave a contented sigh, fluffing his feathers. "So, kid," the parrot murmured, voice softer than Milo had ever heard. "Where to next?" Milo chuckled, his eyes still shining with tears, but his smile steady and strong. "Everywhere," he whispered. We'll go everywhere." And with that, Milo took his first steps into the city of endless light, not as a wanderer chasing myths, but as an explorer who had found his place in the grand, unending story of the skies. The city welcomed him, the light embraced him, and the future stretched wide and infinite before him.